Vox Novus, the new voice. Vox Novus, the new dimension. Vox Novus, thought and movement leaders who will share from their experience and offer tools to help us navigate our rapidly changing world. My name is Victor Fuhrman. Welcome to Vox Novus, the new voice. As we emerge from the stress and trauma of the pandemic and all of the challenges we've faced, what techniques may we use to let go, de-stress, and improve our overall well-being? Neuroscientist Dr. Patrick Porter returns to Vox Novus this week and shares his findings on natural ways of de-stressing, healing, and his award-winning app, BrainTap. Please join me in welcoming back to Vox Novus Dr. Patrick Porter. Welcome, Dr. Porter.
Hey, thanks for bringing me back. It's great to be here.
My pleasure. Dr. Porter, for our listeners meeting you for the first time, please share your early path and how it led to your interest in the mysteries of the brain.
Well, I was fortunate enough to get held back in second grade, so that put me on alert. And then my father actually started getting help for his alcoholism, and he found a technology where he used really technology-driven meditation to help us calm our brain and learn to think and act better and balance my brain. And it really improved my learning capacity as well as my sports performance. And since then, I still feel like I wake up every morning wondering what I'm going to do with my life, because this is what I've done since I was a kid. I love it.
That's wonderful. What type of technology was involved in that meditation?
There was this, they called it the Silva Sound, and it was we now would know it as an isochronic tone, like a series of beeps and blips and squawks and things. It really is a weird sound, but what it does to the brain, it literally balances the two hemispheres in a mono way. Instead of having to wear earphones, you could put this in a room. Some people do this now in spas. They have isochronic tone generators that make it feel like you're on a mountain, or also you do this by using waterfalls. Like if you have a bubbling brook in like that runs over marble or something in your waiting room, you're really creating a 10 hertz frequency that causes the body to relax.
I know that there's certain other frequencies that people often meditate to, somewhere in the 450 range. Are you familiar with those?
Oh, yeah. Now you're talking about solfeggio frequencies. Those are different. I was speaking of earth frequencies. So there's three different kind of frequencies people talk about. One is called Nogier frequencies by Dr. Nogier that showed us 7 frequencies of the body. And then solfeggio, yes, those are good. We include those also in our technology and what we do.
Wonderful. Prior to the creation of BrainTap, what was your work focused on?
Mostly I worked with suicidal teens and pregnant teens. And, while that is very good for the soul to do those kind of things, I found that it was rather depressing because we have a very limited budget. I worked with the Arizona Health Council. We were funded by the state pretty much. So we were very limited in what we could do. And I thought, well, if I go out to the private sector, I could do more good.
Now, many of us have heard the term neuroplasticity. What is neuroplasticity, and how did it inspire your work?
Well, back when I started, we didn't know about neuroplasticity as much. They didn't know the brain could change. But really think about it like how the brain rewires and gives you backup systems for things like memories, focus, and concentration. So when you think about neuroplasticity, think about how much energy your brain has. The more energy it has, the more capable it is to help you to remember things, to be creative, to basically get outcomes in your life. So the less energy, the less neuroplasticity, because it's measured by neurological activity across the brain. So when the brain starts shutting down because it's unwiring because of things like dementia or Alzheimer's, that's why their brain shows up with less neuroplasticity. Or if you have a brain damage, like you have a TBI, a traumatic brain injury, those can also inhibit the brain's function. So think about it as the more neuroplasticity you have, the better brain function, the faster brain function. I like to tell people it's kind of like a computer. We don't go to the store to upgrade our computer and get a slower one. We go there to get a faster one that'll do processing power. So the more of this neuroplasticity, the faster your brain works, the faster you can interact and basically participate in life.
So you had mentioned traumatic brain injury, for example, from a cerebral hemorrhage or a stroke. Is it possible for the brain to be rewired using neuroplasticity after a traumatic brain injury?
Yes, and I think 15 years ago when they started really finding this out, it blew a lot of the researchers away. I mean, this is what happens all the time, but in the past, it was happened because of almost by accident. Some people would heal and some people wouldn't. Now they know, like keeping somebody in the dark after a concussion, they now know that's probably the worst thing you can do for the brain. We need to give the brain adequate light and stimulus, not too much, but there's an amount that you want to give it so we can start training the brain, because the brain stores things holographically. But if we don't train it to go get those other pieces of information, it basically unwires itself under stress. Like an injury, it would unwire itself under those conditions.
Now, you had mentioned energy, and you had mentioned, we know that when the body needs energy, we have to give it a certain amount of nutrition, we have to give it oxygen. What are the elements that the brain needs?
Well, the brain needs more than anything else, something like light, because the light actually, we would get that normally by being outside, and we get it through our eyes and through our skin. We have receptors on our skin. They're called chromophores, but think of them as little batteries that charge up and they dispense ADP, which this ATP is what the brain needs for energy. They call it mitochondrial health now for those that are into researching and being healthy. When our brain doesn't get enough of this energy, and our brain needs fat as energy, not sugar. And that's the misconception. People think, oh, I'm tired, I need energy. They go get a candy bar. And even though that tastes good, the sugar actually goes to the brain first, and then it starts killing off brain cells, just like alcohol would. Alcohol is just a high dose sugar. So when then we get a little buzz. So you're getting that little buzz off the candy bar, but what the brain really needs is what they call ketones. So we would get that mostly through fat derived from good fats, omega-3s and omega-6 fats. And you can also feed the brain things like even dark chocolate is really good, like 80. When you think about the cocoa content, 80% chocolate is okay in moderation for the brain. You can also do things like eating different fruits that would be good for the brain. But high fiber foods are also very good for the brain because they slowly reduce sugar into the system, and they have an effect to get the toxins out. Because when you have fiber, some fibers can absorb actually 20 to 200% its size and toxins from the body. So one of the biggest deterrents in the brain is the toxic buildup that happens just from metabolism. But then you add on traumatic brain injuries or stress or aging, and the brain can have quite a load of stress that needs to get rid of.
You had talked about memory and people, unfortunately, who have things like Alzheimer's disease and other things that are so devastating to the memory. But for the average person who's aging, I just turned 69 last month, and I was blessed with a very, very good memory. And as I've been aging, it takes me a little bit longer to use that the fast drive in there, the hard drive, and retrieve that information. Are there exercises that can be done to improve the memory, normal memory?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a few things you can do. Number one, they know that breathing can do that. I actually had a paper published just about 30 days ago through PubMed where we showed some deep breathing exercises actually trains the frontal lobe of the brain, which has to do with memory and focus and concentration. So there's some simple, easy breathing exercises. I'll just mention two of them here so the listeners can start using them or look them up. One is called box breathing, where you breathe into the mental count of 4, you hold that breath for the mental count of 4, you breathe out to the mental count of 4, and then you leave it expelled for a 4 count, and you continue that process. If you can do that for 5 minutes a day, you'll see a big improvement in brain function. And then I always recommend at night before going to bed that you begin a gratitude journal in your mind. You start thinking about all the things you're grateful for and start putting together a success reel of all the things. It could be, for the aging person, it could be all the life memories that are pleasant. Bring them up in your mind and breathe into the mental count of 4 and breathe out to the mental count of 8. This is going to exercise your nervous system. And your nervous system, 70% of it's in your brain. So what this does, when you breathe in, you're going to excite the sympathetic system, which is your fight or flight response. And when you breathe out, you're going to turn on the parasympathetic system, which is your rest, digest, and recover. And what will happen eventually is, because you have that flexibility, when you get into sleep, you're going to sleep deeper, you're going to detox the brain better, you're going to wake up with more energy, and that energy is going to give you a better memory. That's
wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. That 4-part breath that you're talking about sounds a lot like yogic breathing that people who practice yoga do.
Yes. In fact, the study, if they look it up on PubMed, if somebody does, they're going to see we had we called it a Kundalini breath because it's based on a pranayama. So yeah, they are yogic breathing.
Absolutely.
There's a big benefit to. There's a lot of different breaths. I mean, we could probably spend the whole hour here talking about breathing exercises.
Now, that's part of what you would call, or what you would call, Brain Fitness 101. Please give us some insight into this growing health trend and the science behind it.
Well, we pretty much everyone agrees that you can't outthink a bad diet. You can have the best thoughts in the world, but if you're eating bad foods, your body is going to deteriorate. The second is we got to get up and move and breathe. And we now know that moving and breathing actually affects the brain. So walking is a good one. Earlier, I should have mentioned that. So just getting out and walking and swinging your arms is going to help brain function. But three, we have to do things that challenge our brain. And the way that we find the most cohesion or the most benefit of challenging it is through light, sound, and vibration. That can be seen as going to different places. We can't always vacation, but find different ways to drive home. In fact, even eating with your opposite hand, believe it or not, is going to train your brain to become more brain fit. So anything you do that challenges your system, because we learn best under stressful environments, but most games are fun. So we don't really think of them as stressful, but they are stressful on the body. And those ones that can get us doing things, even writing with an opposite hand or doing some creative crafts or something like that with your opposite hand to get your whole body involved. We always say that there's three things you can do to really increase your brain function outside, of course, our technology, which is you can do Tai Chi, yoga, or get up and dance. And even if you're not part of a dance group or you don't want to go take lessons, just shut the shades, turn on the music you like to dance to, and dance just like nobody's watching. But that's going to actually affect your brain and get your body functioning better. And if you are wheelchair bound, they've actually found something called blood flow restriction bands. These are bands that they now have. If they look up brain blood flow restriction bands, there's a lot of them on the market. There's a few that we recommend. We've had people sitting in wheelchairs growing muscle because they act like they're lifting weights, but because of this new technology and their brain function works because it pushes more blood through the brain. So there's a lot of technologies out there to get the brain more fit. And I think that's the missing piece to real health and longevity is your brain's not going to do it on its own. We have to do something to get it to have that action or have that result we want.
You had mentioned diet, and you had mentioned the good fat, low sugar diet. Can you give us an example of some of those foods?
Well, instead of having salad dressing, for instance, one of the best things you can do is just put olive oil, not really good olive oil, put that on your salad, put salt and pepper, and put some Italian seasoning. That's going to be a good fat you're going to get into your system. Now, the other is you can buy different fats at the stores that do it like supplementation. But as far as food goes, the studies have shown if you could eat one avocado a day, even though some people feel, there's a lot of fat in avocado. This is good. Avocados are good fat. You're going to find not only will your digestive system work better, but your brain is going to become more clear and more focused. When we're eating, if you are eating meats of any kind, they should be grass-fed, healthy meats that don't have all the steroids and things like that in them, because that's just going to be a toxic load. We recommend only having red meat like one time a week, if possible. And then you could also have salmon. Salmon is a very good source, but you want to make sure as much as possible you get live or what they call caught in the wild salmon. Or if it isn't, now they're having some farms that are doing it right. They're not having them all live on top of each other. There's some that do that, but I would prefer getting the other. And then a lot of dark, rich green vegetables. Those are going to be good for the brain, and they're high in fiber. So those are really good to do. And if you're drinking coffee, you should add some MCT oil to it, which is very inexpensive. You can get it at any grocery store now. And just add that to your coffee because it's going to slow down the insulin response of the coffee, and it's going to give you more energy.
What does MCT stand for?
I should have had that at the top of my tongue. Basically, it's a way that's a chain of fats. It would be in the omega-3 family. Mm-hmm. So when you look at it, it's going to be an omega-3. Now, omega-6s would be like olive oil, and omega-9s would be like some kind of nuts and legumes and things like that.
That's fascinating. What about time of day? Is there a specific time of day that you should or shouldn't eat?
Well, we always say you should not eat 4 hours before sleeping, because when you're digesting, it's actually best to go to sleep hungry. You know, the old saying, you got to go to bed hungry. That's a bad thing. No, that's a good thing, because as soon as you do that, the body actually starts using its own fat stores during sleep. And you can actually burn more fat while you sleep if you do that than if you were to run 3 miles and go lift weights. Your body can burn so much fat while you're sleeping. And just going to bed a little bit hungry will actually help your sleep, and you'll sleep deeper. Now, the caveat to that is during the day, to make sure you space out your eating and you have a good meal, that last meal of the day. Some people will try intermittent fasting, but I recommend that you work with somebody on that, because you never know. If you have low blood sugar, it's not a good idea to do that. You probably have to eat more smaller meals. So it's really an individual thing. If you find that you can go for the longer you can go without eating, actually they found it's the better. In Indian traditions, and I'm talking about India, they say that when we're young, we eat 3 meals a day and we're sick. And then we get older, 2 meals a day and we're healthy. 1 meal a day and we have excellent health. So that's where I think all this big movement right now in intermittent fasting works. You know, but I believe that if you get up in the morning and you're hungry, that's a good sign. So, but you should eat healthy foods at that time. Look at your meal and say, wow, is this a dessert I'm eating for a meal, or is this a healthy meal? You know, and most people, if it has, sugar in it, then it's probably a dessert. You know, it's okay to have these foods every once in a while, but if you make them your morning staple, it's going to really throw off your blood sugar. And blood sugar, as we're finding here in the last 2 years, is a really big determiner of how healthy we can be and how healthy our immune system functions. So we want to down-regulate as much sugar as we can. Just an aside, Victor, that most people don't know this, but one stressful event triggers your liver to produce as much sugar as a candy bar.
Wow.
And now that's circulating through your system. So not only what you're eating, but what's eating you is most important. So that's where the stress reduction comes in. Just getting out, walking in nature, whatever you can do to get out of the stress cycle. Turn off the television for a little while. You know, at night, try to watch comedies, something that's light entertainment. If you're going to check on the news, it's better to do that in the afternoon time period or lunch or after lunch, because then you have time to process that. And it's not bringing you the fear when you're going to sleep, things like that.
Repeat that one more time. The liver under stress actually produces sugar?
Yeah, an article I wrote about 10 years ago, which was very well received out there, was how stress is more fattening than chocolate, because one stressful event. Now, if you have several stress events in an hour, you've just eaten several candy bars in the equivalent to sugar. Our body produces sugar. So it also produces a lot of the other essentials that we need. So the liver produces that to overcome the insulin response. So there's always this battle in the body to keep the blood sugar. Most people don't know this, but we need to have our pH in our blood has to be a certain amount. If it's off even a decimal, if it's like 6.9 or whatever, and it goes to 7 or it goes even to 6.6, we die. Now, so that means the liver is going to have to continue to monitor and put sugar into the system. And then the pancreas is going to have to release, the insulin when it overproduces. So it's always in this battle to keep that everything in perfect harmony. And so the food we eat is really medicine that we're eating. It's treating our body at that time. So if, most people, when they get a sugar craving because of stress, we have a stressful event. It's because once that stressful event happens and the body realizes there's no tiger chasing us, there's no imminent threat, and the primitive brain thought that we needed energy to our muscles. It finds out there's nothing to run from. We're sitting in our chair, or we're watching a scary movie, or we're listening to the news. The body then says, okay, now we got to produce insulin. Insulin is a fat storing hormone. So what happens is it circulates through the bloodstream, finds those sugar molecules, and then deposits them in the adipose tissue. All the places that our listeners here don't want, the back of the legs, back of the arms, the belly, the buttocks, those kind of places, because it thinks we're going to need this energy later. And that's why they say that sitting is the next smoking, or is the new smoking, because we're getting all stressed out dealing with things, but we're not using any energy. And that's one of the main problems we have with the weight gain in the world right now, is that we're not as active as we used to be.
How does that relate to people who have PTSD?
Well, what happens there is think of the nervous system as a brake and a gas pedal. So the gas pedal being the sympathetic system, it's the drive that has us the fight or flight, and then we put the brake on. That's the parasympathetics. But what they're doing is they have both of these mashed down at the same time, typically. So the body doesn't know what to do, and what's the driver of the system typically is the sympathetic system. So they have what we call neurological lock. They don't know how to get out of that loop of fear, anxiety, and stress. So the body's totally out of control. And that's why you see that population, unfortunately, doing a lot of drugs and, going off the rails because they're trying to find a way to disengage their nervous system. We're actively in a study right now with Seminole College in a group called the Gray Team down in Boca Raton, Florida. And we're working with them to show them, we have a device called the NeuroCheck where we can actually show them their nervous system. And when they see it, there's 3 regulatory systems. One is the two I talked about. Then the other is the neurohormonal or our biological system. And we showed them that their biological system is trying to control the show. Well, what happens then is we get adrenal fatigue, or we get heart attacks, we get kidney failure, because our organs and things are not designed to regulate that system. Our electrical system in the form of the sympathetic and parasympathetic are what should be running the system. And those are energy systems, not biological systems as they were. So what we show them is by doing certain things, having the proper nutrition, getting them moving and breathing is one of the big things, but getting their body to move, and then doing these brain fitness exercises we're talking about, they're able to unlock this what we call this cycle of high anxiety that happens because their body doesn't know if they're coming or going. There's that expression people say, and it's because when you're under trauma, whatever that is, it doesn't have to be wartime trauma. It could be a rape victim, but whatever happens, or it could be just constant abuse from a father or a mother or a spouse. These kind of things, the brain starts to predict the future. And if there's a lot of damage going on or a lot of abuse, the brain starts to think that's normal. And then it sets up a set of behaviors that basically don't have you functioning in a wellness variety when you're away from that. So you're under stress all the time. And one of the examples, if I can share that, is let's say Jimmy comes back from overseas. It's his 3rd deployment. He comes home, they have a party for him. It's hectic. He doesn't know what to do. Everything's fine. Well, 2 weeks after he's home, everybody's went back to their own life because they have important things they do. And Jimmy's no longer important anymore. So Jimmy's at home and he's at peace. It should be, because there's nothing going on. There's no war. But because his nervous system believes that it's normal to be in high stress environments, he has to cause them. So he has to create an argument with his spouse. He has to create interaction with his whoever, if he's going out for a job. And then in order to compensate that, he might go get alcohol or drugs to calm down his nervous system to give him some relief. And the reality is the relief comes only when he realizes how to regulate these 3 regulatory systems.
My guest is Dr. Patrick Porter. He's the creator of BrainTap. Dr. Porter, please tell our listeners where they can find out more about you and your amazing work.
Well, they can check us out online at Dr. Patrick Porter, at Dr. Patrick Porter, or they can go to the website, drpatrickporteras.com, and they'll find out about BrainTap. And if they want to learn more about some of these practices, they can go to braintap.info, and they can download my book for free. It's called Thrive and Overdrive. They get to keep that book regardless of what they do. And then there's a 15-day trial on our app. So if you have a smartphone, you download the app and you can start practicing some of these techniques and see if it works for you.
And we'll be back with Dr. Porter and more about BrainTap after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Dr. Patrick Porter, the creator of BrainTap. Dr. Porter, what is BrainTap, and why is it called the Peloton of brain fitness?
Well, BrainTap is a way to build in neuroplasticity. We like to call it brain plasticity so people understand it, which is a functional process where the brain becomes more flexible and able to use it. We call it Peloton for the brain, mainly because Peloton started out with a piece of hardware, the bicycle, and then they had a series of videos that you could watch while you're using it. So now it became a home exercise system where BrainTap is the same. You can download, you can have our headset, and then you can download our app, and it can take you through literally over 1,500 sessions that can help you to train your brain in many different ways, from weight loss to stop smoking to brain fitness, helping people with dementia, anxiety, fear, depression, all sorts of different things that we work with the brain. So we figured that that's a good analogy because, we have both an app and a piece of hardware similar to Peloton.
And do you have a neuron in there that tells the brain, yeah, you got to keep going, keep going?
Yeah. Well, what's nice is when you get into these states of alpha and theta, these are two brainwave states below our primary brainwave of beta, you start to feel good because neurotransmitters like acetylcholine and also GABA are produced. These are the feel-good hormones, so you want to stay in that state. So you don't have to be encouraged as much. Peloton uses more dopamine, which is the beta brainwave, to keep you going, and it's a feel-good neurotransmitter, but it also is it's the center of all addictions because you usually have to have an outside trigger to cause that dopamine response.
You shared with us how stress produces excess glucose, sugar in our system, and some of the other things. But what other effects do stress and anxiety have, not only on the brain, but our overall health?
Yeah. Well, one shocking fact they now know about the brain is that the hippocampus can shrink 3/4 of an inch in over 1 year of stress. So I don't know what happened to a lot of people during the last couple of years, but their brain could have shrunk tremendously. And the reason for that is the restriction of blood flow in circulation. And of course, blood flow and circulation, what happens with that, that's how we get nutrients into the parts of the body, and especially the brain, which is very selective in what it brings in. So in the rest of the body, imagine you're eating the best diet on earth, but you are stressed out. The best diet on earth is not being metabolized, digested, and it's just being eliminated. And to compound that, if you're a health-minded person and you're taking the world's greatest supplements, most of those supplements are going to be flushed out of the system because when you're under stress, all the blood in circulation that you need to digest and metabolize that food through your digestive system is now focused on your extremities because your brain thinks that you are under attack. So it's going to keep the muscles, ligaments, and tendons filled with sugar. And when those sugar stores are all filled because you're not moving and breathing and exercising, then it has to store that fat on your body in those adipose tissue areas like the butt, the back of the legs, back of the arms, all the places you really don't want it, right? So the main deterrent of that is when you're under stress, you don't make good decisions because it's like if, people go on game shows all the time and they're super smart and then they get on a game show and they miss an easy question. And it happens to us all the time at parties. You might be at a party and somebody comes over and they introduce themselves and 2 minutes later you want to introduce them to somebody that just walked over, but you can't remember their name because that stress causes one hemisphere of the brain to shut down. And typically, if you're a right brain person, that would be your left hemisphere, the part that holds all that knowledge. If you're a left brain person, then your creativity, that's why if you get a left brain person, you say, we're going to role play today. We're all going to pretend we're mushrooms or trees or animals or whatever. And they tend to shy away from that type of behavior because when they don't feel comfortable. They feel very, very much uncomfortable in those situations because their nervous system doesn't know how to pretend under stress. Now, if they weren't in a stressful place, they could go home with nobody around and comfort of their own home, and they could pretend those things and it'd be fine. So part of it is just state-dependent memories also create the stress and disorder. So it affects every area of your life. In fact, the National Institute of Health has been touting since time immemorial that stress attributes to 97% of all illnesses. So when you think about stress, it's a cornerstone of all disorders in the body and the mind.
Not to mention immunity.
Oh, it's terrible. What it's going to do there's something called psychoimmunology, which means our psychology affects our immune system. We know this for sure. In fact, they've done studies just in the allergic response to things like allergens in the air. That's an immune response. They showed that a 40% increase in purchasing of these kind of not supplements, but medicines for allergies as soon as they started to broadcast on the news what the pollen count was. So all they had to do was tell people what the pollen count was, and their ability or their need to want this medicine went up because it flared up from a psychological standpoint their dysfunction. The body overproduced white marker cells, which is what happens when we're in a threat. So the reality is we should treat our life as a series of challenges. If we treat our life as a series of threats, then our immune system shuts down. But if we treat our life as a series of challenges, it actually shows up almost like Superman, because our immune system is very powerful. It can help us out in, so many ways. When we take people like Wim Hof, we were talking about breathing earlier, Wim Hof is known for his breathing techniques. They've injected poisons into his system and he breathes them out of his body. He doesn't get sick like a Superman. But he says this is what everybody can do. It's just we're not trained to do that.
Yeah, don't try this at home, folks. Don't try this at home. Yeah, I know who Wim Hof is. Interesting man. You had mentioned the hippocampus and that it starts to shrink. What is the hippocampus? What does it do?
This is really important, especially if you're over 55, because this part of the brain is what takes our short-term memory and makes them long-term memories. So think about like the internet. The internet doesn't really do anything but link information, right? So we have a server over here and we have our desktop at home. If just because we can't get to that server over there doesn't mean the information isn't there. It just means we can't get to it. So the hippocampus is the conduit that takes think of your brain like a desktop and your consciousness like that computer out there somewhere, because they've now definitely proven that we're not located in our body. We can visualize being somewhere and part of our consciousness goes there. Where it's going, nobody really knows because nobody knows how the brain functions. But in our brain, we know that our brain stores memories in 6 to 8 different places. Every memory is stored like that. So nothing is stored together. It's all stored separately in different regions of the brain. And then when we're needing that information, the hippocampus lights up through that, what we talked about earlier, that neuroplasticity, sends those neurons out to find that information, and then it recomposes it, or what we call represents it. So you think about presentation, it represents that information. Now, depending upon how quickly and easily it brought that information, it brings you back truthful information. Now, one thing that might be shocking to our listeners here today is that everything that you recall has been distorted, deleted, and changed based on your perception of reality. So it's not ever real. It's not true knowledge. It's basically the best knowledge we could bring to us at that moment. So when the hippocampus shrinks or it gets damaged, we can't assemble those memories. And then what happens is the brain, just like we were talking about neuroplasticity, the brain will want to conserve that energy. It's too much work to do that. So what it does, it starts unwiring the brain so it can conserve energy. It says, that information isn't there anymore. Let's not make it available. In the computers too, for those that know about computers, there's something called the file allocation table. This is kind of like the hippocampus. It tells the rest of the brain where all the information is stored. So if that table gets corrupt, like on your hard drive, your hard drive's still there, you got to send it off to an expert so they can go get that information. We don't have an expert who can get that information off our hard drive right now. But that's what's really happening. All the memories are still there, all that information. We just can't get to it. So the hippocampus plays a very big role in memory, cognition, creativity, and just day-to-day functioning.
You know, it's interesting that you share that because, as I mentioned, I was blessed with a really good memory, and I used to have instant recall. If I wanted to think of something, it was there immediately. And as I aged, got into my 60s, I had mentioned to you that my memory was not as sharp as it used to be. And one of the things that I would try was to force the memory to come out. In other words, try through association. If it was a person's name, start going through letters. And every time I did that, it didn't work, and eventually within an hour or so, the memory would come and so on. I stopped trying to force it, and the memories came back.
That's good. Yeah, it's all about blood flow and circulation too. So when you're stressed, remember your blood flow is going to restrict. You're not going to have the same energy to bring up that piece of information. So, but I do think association is one of the keys. And that's why I said every night when you go to sleep, if you make a review of all your positive memories, you're training the brain how to sort and categorize those wonderful memories, and you're refreshing them. And in psychology, we call this revivification. So you're going to revive those memories, just like when I was growing up, I'm sure you remember too, Victor, the cassettes that we would use. So those cassettes, if you didn't use them for a few years and you try to play them, sometimes they wouldn't play because the magnetic nature of that tape had worn off. So the same thing's true with the magnetic nature of our memories. We need to refresh them every once in a while. That's why having photo albums, going back to reunions, just having community is going to help your memory, having talks and just bringing up things.
Our world and our society and every sentient being on this planet has just come through and continues to come through a series of events that could lead to what I would call collective PTSD. How may the brain be trained to be more resilient to that stress?
Well, I think one thing, remember that there's nothing that's final. Some people are already predicting that we're going to be wearing masks the rest of our lives. Our brain is always predicting our future. So be willing to change and modify and look at what's working for you and what isn't. And I do think we all going through that. I mean, people are so afraid now of even having a cold. I mean, I can't tell you how many people, they get a cold and the first thing they do is think it's COVID. Well, people used to get colds all the time and nobody was concerned about it. Even the flu. I remember when Michael Jordan played in the finals with Chicago, he had the flu so bad and he was out there playing. Today, that would never happen because you don't know what kind of flu he has, right? You don't know what he's doing. But I think that the main thing that we need to look at is that this is an isolated event. In the history of the humankind, we've been through many of these before. And of course, there's going to be a residual, which means we're going to have this lasting memory of this. And I think that whatever the trauma that people are experiencing, from losing loved ones to compromising their own health and all of those things, is to remember that put the past into perspective. The past, we have to learn from it or we're doomed to relive it. So we have to look at what happened during that time. Was there anything we could have done differently? And I'm talking now on a personal level, not on a global level or a political level, because I don't have any say in that. But we need to look at a local level at our own personal life. What could we do differently? So number one, what we can do is we can make sure our blood sugar is right. We talked about that earlier. And how can we do that? Number one, let's reduce our stress. Let's get physically fit so that we become we inoculate ourselves against these ravages of stress. Because if those people who are in really good health, physically fit, sound of mind and body, they didn't have to worry about this as much. I mean, you still had to take care of yourself and not compromise your situation. But, personally, I believe I could have walked in a hospital full of COVID patients and walk out the other and not have it. And supposedly I had it because I give blood every 2 months. And they said I have the COVID, antibody, but it's, you don't have to have all those feelings in that. So the anticipatory stress is what's going to be the problem. So we need to stop that program as soon as possible. And the only way you can do that is start substituting new thoughts, new ideas, and new actions. So I think, the best thing that can happen is start building your communities back. Because there's a blue study, I don't know if you ever heard of that before, but there's these studies where they looked at centenarians, people who live over 100 years old, and some of the qualities they had. The number one thing that they attributed their long life to was being in a community. like being part of the OM network or something. They're all part of something bigger than themselves, a community. And that was taken away from us. And I think that's the first thing that needs to be reestablished. Second is to reestablish our own dominion over our health and vitality in our body. What we can control is what we put into our body. That is the foods, the thoughts, the ideas, and the activities, and start making changes. Because if you're going to rely on the past, it's going to be doom and gloom. But if you rely on the future, we should come out of this better because we're more protected. We know how to take care of ourselves. It's a wake-up call for so many people. If they look at it as a wake-up call, I'm a big believer that whatever happened to you either makes you stronger or makes you weaker. And in my case, we talked earlier how I started in my book, Awaken the Genius. I have a chapter, how I was blessed to be the son of an alcoholic. And not that I felt that way when I was a kid, but because I learned from what my dad did. And I realized that I could continue to drink and, blame everyone else on earth of my problems, or I could go learn from the people who've succeeded and do something good with my life and focus on that. And I don't have a problem with alcohol, and mostly because I don't drink it, so there's everybody has their own attitude about that. I don't mind people drinking. I think some people can get away with it, but there are certain things that no one gets away with. No one wins if they drink 6 beers. I mean, your body is going to feel it unless you're, 300 pounds or something, so your body is going to take over. So get good sleep. I think one of the best ways to get good sleep, think positive thoughts, and catch yourself when you start catastrophizing your thinking, and question, as Einstein said, question everything. Question what is really going on. How do you personally feel? What's going on in your community? And how can you rise up and be an example to someone? Because if you can motivate one person, if everyone on earth said, I'm going to motivate one person to be in wellness now, instead of focusing on the problem, let's focus on the solution, we would live in a very different world than we live in today.
Sage advice from Dr. Patrick Porter. We'll be back with more of Dr. Porter after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. ascendinghearts.com.
Right now our country feels divided, but there's a place where people are coming together.
I was nervous to talk to someone so different than me.
Me too.
Love Has No Labels and One Small Step are helping people with different political views, beliefs, and experiences connect through conversation, and it feels good.
This conversation gives me hope.
It gives me a lot of hope too.
Take a step toward bringing our country and your community together. Start a conversation at lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep. A message from StoryCorps, Love Has No Labels, and the Ad Council.
So I'm a cat, and I just moved in with this new human, and she's got this little toy she's always playing with, all day long. Tap, 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 bloop, bloop. She can't put it down. There it is. Oh, and get this. She even talks to it. Last week, she asked it for Chinese, and guess what? Egg rolls showed up. Like magic. Humans have cool toys.
A person is the best thing to happen to a shelter pet. Be that person. Adopt. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the ShelterPetProject.org.
Back on Vox Novus, my guest this week is Dr. Patrick Porter, the creator of BrainTap. Dr. Porter, why is BrainTap so especially important now?
I think the biggest reason is that people are locked in their stress response. I mean, we turn on the news or we turn on the radio or TV, whatever, we're being bombarded by negative information. We need to take the time to step out of that world and into the inner world where the innate intelligence of our body can take over and bring back health, which happens through rest and relaxation and basically digesting the foods that we've consumed and plan our life a little bit differently than letting other people. I like to tell people it's better to learn how to think instead of what to think. A lot of people turn on the news and TV to figure out what they should be thinking, and that's not a good way to do it because then you're in a reactionary mindset. We need more creative people that are problem solvers that look at life as a challenge instead of as a threat.
Do we need to turn off the 24-hour news cycle?
Well, I think we need to be aware, but for me, I get my news from other people. So I've turned it off because there's unfortunately, in most of the news out there, it's so biased. And I'm not just talking about individuals. I'm just talking about what we see. I mean, I don't know if I shared with you on the other time we spoke, but there was a gentleman in Tucson that started the All Positive News Network. And I thought, wow, this is great. He said it only lasted 2 months because nobody watched it. It's kind of like a car accident. Everybody wants to stop and see the car accident, but in their whole theory, and I believe this is true, even during the darkest days of COVID, there is more incredibly positive, loving, just stories going on out there that could be shared that would be, heartfelt, improving our life kind of story situations than the news is telling us about. I mean, they pick out the worst of the worst to tell us. And it could be happening, like I was in Texas and they were showing me, I just happened to be in the lobby of the hotel and the news was on and they were showing us murder victims from Vegas. So that didn't even have anything to do with me in Dallas. You know what I mean? So, but they have to really seek out far and wide to get the most damaging, because that's what people want to see, unfortunately. And I think people need to, one of the nice things that I just read about was, some of the news networks are down so much. Like one of the major news networks is down to less than 1 million followers watching their news program. That tells you that people are really sick and tired of this constant barrage of fear and anxiety and stress. And I think that should be congratulations. That's how you vote, by your actions. So I think we turn that off and then they start showing us the positive news. That's what I want to see.
Sick and tired of being sick and tired, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Exactly.
You had talked about people who have sleep issues and having positive thoughts and positive memories prior to going to sleep. I hear a lot of people, a lot of friends talking about inability to get a good night's sleep recently, especially recently. What suggestions do you offer to improve sleep quality in addition to the positive thoughts? And how do you address this with BrainTap?
Well, number one, I recommend no news for the 4 hours too before going to bed. We've all had the experience where we fall asleep on the couch and we start dreaming about the military movie we were just watching. Our brain takes in that last pieces of information and tries to figure it out. And if the problem's too big, it just creates anxiety and fear. But what I recommend is no alcohol at least 2 hours before bed. And you want to start shutting down the lights in your home, because these chromophores, these energy cells on the body that collect energy, even if you have a light on, like a night light in your bedroom, that can interfere with your circadian rhythm in the way that you sleep, because our bodies are designed to really be sleeping outside. And when the sun comes up, we wake up. So if there's any light, that could inhibit some people. Now, 20% of the people are very sensitive to light and don't even know it. So start turning off the lights in your home. Watch only comedies or light entertainment at least 2 hours, if not 4 hours before going to sleep. The best thing you can do is read a book. Is one of the best ways to relax the mind and body. I mean, a real book, not a digital book. Some people will have an effect with the digital. Now, some of the readers that use that digital ink are okay, but it really does affect the brain. If you really are having trouble sleeping, we recommend doing like a warm bath or something before bed. How BrainTap deals with this is, our brain has different frequencies that we operate in at night and in the morning. In the morning, we want to wake up the brain with something called SMR training, sensory motor rhythm training. At night, we want to down-regulate the brain. So what we do using light, sound, and vibration is we're going to train the brain to slow down. For those that remember how we used to tune cars with a tuning light, that's kind of the way BrainTap works. The brain's going to follow that frequency down into a slower frequency. Now, brain frequencies tend to be from 0.05 to 100. So the sleeping frequencies are actually 4 to 0. And some people will, or 0.5, because you're always going to have some activity, but those frequencies, those brain frequencies are what's going to rejuvenate and replenish your body for the next day. And then we go through these cycles at night. So we have to reach that deep level for sleep. So what we found in our studies, and I'll just mention one study. So this is a recent study we did in New Zealand and Australia. It was a Australian mining company. And these were people that worked in the dark. They actually arrived in the dark and left in the dark. They never saw the light of day. So we had them do 3 BrainTap sessions every day, and half the group only used our app. And what we found was the group that used the headset, in 3 weeks, they had a 70% improvement in sleep efficiency, which means that they had at least 2 hours of deep, restful sleep, 2 hours of REM sleep, and the rest was kind of what we do. We kind of go through waves of sleep. The group that was just using the headset got to that same 70% improvement after 6 weeks. So whether you're using the app that we talked about that people can download here, they could probably start sleeping in the 15 free days that they have. And they don't have to put a credit card on that number that website that I was talking about. It's a free program that we do to help people get better sleep. So they can go there and try that out.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. What about productivity? A lot of people were out of work for a while, or they've been working remotely, and the stress has affected their ability to be productive and do the work that they truly want to do. What would you offer them?
Well, I would definitely say your work environment should be different. Don't roll out of bed and put your laptop on your lap. Put a place in your home. If you're going to work from home, have a workspace so you actually get up and go to that place. And even though you're going to be working at home, don't work all day in your pajamas. And then at 6 o'clock, you realize, wow, I'm still... I never took a shower. Treat the day as if you were going into the office. Now, if you're going into the office, then that's a good thing. But what happens is when we do certain things over time, we start to build those habits and patterns. The old saying is, first we build our habits and then they build us. So what happened over COVID, the time period where people were working at home and things like that, is people started these bad habits. So don't try to break them all at one time. Just take the one that's the most destructive, that you think would give you the most maximum gain, and start changing it. What I would recommend mostly is get up in the morning, do something like go outside, walk on the earth, barefoot if you can, if it's warm where you're at, but get grounded. And that's going to have a big effect on their physiology and psychology. And then do some form of exercise. And if you don't know what to do, just go on to YouTube and type in Tai Chi or yoga or dance, and then just do it. They're free. Start moving and breathing. That's going to play a big role in how your brain functions as far as creativity and getting things done. Then as you're working, of course, if you had the BrainTap, I would say get up in the morning, do your BrainTap session first thing in the morning with one of our AM programs that gets the brain, we call it digital coffee. It wakes the brain up. And then in the middle of the day, it's normal. This is one thing that people didn't realize usually when they were working away from home. But at 2 o'clock every day, our temperature drops 2 degrees and we get tired. Most people go get coffee, tea, or chocolates. What I recommend you do is get up. That's when you should be moving and breathing. Do a little meditation. Do something to relax the brain and the nervous system, even if it's a 5-minute breath workout. Then go back. And then if you still want a cup of coffee or something, then go do it. But first, see what happens if you just use your electrical system. And the whole idea is when you're done with work, be done with work. Put it away, just like you would lock the door of your office and go home. You don't keep, don't have your laptop up at the table. And so when the whole family's eating and you got your laptop up and you're working, put that away. Make work separate from the family life or from what you're doing that's not work related.
And kids out there, when you have your meal with your parents, please put away your cell phones.
Yeah, we have a policy, no phones at the table. And it's funny because a few times I've been in business situations where I had my phone with me and my grandkids will say, Grampy, no phone at the table. So I say, quickly put it away because I believe in that. I think that's one of the things we're missing. They've actually shown that families that eat and communicate together, they have a stronger family bond. And that's one of the things we really need right now is strong families.
Not to mention communication skills.
Yes.
people need to learn how to talk again instead of tapping little things onto their phones.
Yeah, we went into a restaurant just the other day, and there was a family of 6 sitting there. They all had their phones out. And I said, wouldn't it be funny if they were texting each other, while they're sitting at the table?
This is true. I mean, there really should be like a mindfulness thing that when you're gathering with family around the table for that meal, turn off the phones, turn off all the distractions, be present and loving and compassionate, and be there with the people you love, because I think that's what our world needs right now. My guest, Dr. Patrick Porter, he's the creator of BrainTap. Dr. Porter, one more time, please tell our listeners where they can find out more about you and this amazing work.
They can find out more about me on social media they put in at Dr. Patrick Porter, or they go to my website, drpatrickporter.com. They can also see what's up there and get links to BrainTap and see if they want to try it. They can also go right now and get a free book at braintap.info, and no credit card necessary. You can download the book. You can read it on your tablet or your computer. It's a digital version. And then you get 15 days free on the app. And then at the end of 15 days, if you don't do anything, it just goes away. But it's 15 days free. You can try that out, especially those that aren't sleeping well. We have a program called Sleep RX on there that was actually voted the best sleep app of 2020. So you can try that out.
And sleep app beats sleep apnea any day.
Yes, exactly.
Dr. Porter, thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of this really, really critical and important information with our listeners.
Well, thank you for having me, Victor. It's always great to be a guest.
And thank you for joining us on Vox Novus. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.